Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Chef live stream. Woo!
Yo, how's it going?
Hey. Um, as I'm sure most of you know already, I'm Kaya Tolliver, DevRel here at Progress, and I am here with my colleague Dan, who's also a DevRel here at Progress for Chef. And today we're going to talk about inspect and terraform. Sorry, we started a little late, guys. Sorry about that. We had a few technical difficulties this morning that we had to work through, but we are here. We have persevered, and we're happy to be here with you guys. Thank you
There's
so much for being patient with us.
there was some crazy echo going on, and I was like, "Can I?"
Right,
Yeah, yeah, it was. If I
right,
didn't mute the speakers, then I would get like the worst feedback ever. I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure whether it was Restream or my computer, but it seems to have like I clicked the same button like 6 times, and it's just stopped doing it now. So, debugging at its finest. Just click the button
right.
so that it goes away, right?
Exactly. That there you go. There you go. You
But
made it.
it's fine.
It's magic. But
We were going to talk editors today, but we'll probably leave that till next week now because we're
'cause we're short on
probably jammed
time.
for time. And I'm
Yeah.
hoping that one will get into an editor war. I know a few people who are not VS Code people, and if you're not VS Code people, then you're gonna have to like fight your corner because there's so many of us VS Code users.
Right, you
Uh,
really have to because it's like,
yeah,
but why are you not though? Like
yeah,
that's the
like
problem.
why?
Speaking of
Uh,
why, if, pre-flight checks. If you are not following us on Twitter, why? That's another good question.
why?
Like
Why?
definitely right. If you're not following us on Twitter, you're wrong. Follow us on Twitter at Chef. You'll find our updates, cool things going on at Chef, and just stay, in tune with what we're doing. Absolutely follow us at Chef on Twitter. Also, if you're not in the community Slack, you should be. You'll also get updates there, like pretty exclusive things. Ask questions and get them answered. And also, just get to interact with some cool people, with some cool kids, because this is the Cool Kids Club on Community Slack. We are in the inspect room, habitat,
Yep,
sous chefs,
yep.
uh, hackathon, because we've got a hackathon going on, and if you are a part of the hackathon, you should be in the hackathon room. Speaking of that said hackathon, there's still time to sign up. We've got about 2 weeks left, and I mean, hopefully, like I think 2 weeks is enough time to like create something great.
Yeah,
Our
it totally
hackathon,
is.
yeah, right. I think so. The only rules, the big thing is there are not a lot of rules. The only real rules here is that you have to create something for good, and you have to use a chef product to do that. And it could be for the good of humankind, or I mean, as we talked about on Tuesday, it doesn't even have to be humankind. It could be like animal kind. It could be any kind, or it could be something related to DevOps. The prizes are freaking amazing. $60,000 worth of prizes. First prize is
Yeah,
15K. 15K for first prize. Like second prize 10. Third is 5K, and honorable mentions. You can either get a or an iPad. And how many people do we have
we have
currently?
536 people now,
Wow,
which
that
is what 150 more than last week.
is
I don't know where these people are coming
yeah,
from, but they will come out of the woodwork, right? I think
right.
we were hit 400 last week, which is mad in itself. But we've got some interesting submissions already. I've seen a couple of them. Although top driver, you might still win a prize rather than just the t-shirt, yeah, your shirt, because
Oops,
just
sorry
because
about
your build doesn't work doesn't mean it isn't usable. or just fix the build. Because builds are always easily fixable, right? So it's
Right. I
fine.
mean, top driver, if you're not like, why, we can troubleshoot that with some of the mentors on
Yeah,
the Hackathon Slack channel, bro. Like,
yeah. So if you're having trouble with any of your build stuff, and you need to talk to anybody, the Chef community Slack is the place to go.
yes,
And if
put it
it's
up
not in
there.
general, and if general is just getting swamped, then the hackathon room will work.
And and yep, and top driver, you won't just get a shirt because even if you just submit, you get a shirt, some stickers, and a Badger badge. So think
Yeah.
about it. I mean, still submit, and ask the question because you could get like we could troubleshoot that and get you on your way to winning that 15K. So absolutely don't give up. There's still time. There's still time. Cool. So, I like, do we want to do a game? I mean, I know we've got like 10 minutes before, like, we probably should.
I can blast through the Terraform stuff because, in fact, maybe we should do Terraform stuff first. I've
And
got any
then
time
see.
left. Definitely play a game because I really want to play a game today.
Okay,
But
cool. Cool. Let's do it.
and then we've got some questions. Hopefully, people have seen some questions. I know there's one person in the audience who let me see who has used Terraform for. Let me just get rid of this. Get away. Who has used Terraform for spinning up, well, for testing infra, not for testing it. Sorry, who has used Inspect for testing with Terraform, mostly because I forced him to use it. So sorry about that, Tom. Uh, so this is my usual, like, it's a public repo. If anyone wants to go and see where it is, I'll drop it in the chat in both uh, the YouTube chat and the Twitch chat. So you can see all of the code here. This is a repo I've got to just create AWS users. It's a simple module, and this is my kind of best use case. This is my scenario where I wanted to see if I was comparing test tools here. So bear in mind, there's no like fancy Terraform in here. It is just, in fact, it was, my God, I created this 2 years ago. Can't believe it's been 2 years now. It was just to create a user and put it into groups, and then really exercise like the end scenarios with inspec or with what was the Go tool I was using? Let me see. I was using. Come on. I was using Testify, which is fine. TerraTest, thanks Tom. Yeah, I was using TerraTest, and TerraTest is fine, and it has some really interesting use cases, and I quite like it for a bunch of stuff. But here we've got a module which we the Terraform module that does a bunch of stuff. And if I go to main in a second here, I've got some users, got some administrators, and then actually I've got an IAM user that gets created.
Mm.
And then I've got some IAM groups and then group memberships. So create me a user, put them in the group, make sure they can and can't do stuff. Pretty simple.
Mhm.
I could probably show this working, but I'm going to talk through it, and then if I've got any questions, just jump out and I can sort of expand on that as well. So if you want to see it working, give me a shout. But if we're going to test, and if no one's seen Inspect before, you usually have them in the test integration default folder because, well, this is our default suite of tests, so they usually come in suites of tests. I've just called it default. You could call it Bob or Mary or cheese if you want to call it cheese. And then we've got our inspect control here. Now, what we want to do is we want to use the inspect AWS pack, and so inspect has the idea of resource packs, and they're really nice. You can think of them as kind of plugins, or sort of there's a core set of controls, and then there's like AWS controls and Azure controls. They are split out just because they go at a different cadence. Let's say AWS released a bunch of new resources, and Inspec wanted to sort of include those as part of their. Um, so we wanted to be able to test those using Inspec. Well, that's
Okay.
fine, but we would then have to release a new version of Inspec core every time we wanted it as a new AWS resource. Instead of doing that, which we used to do, we now have Inspec packs, which then are versioned. I'm using 1.59. I'm going to assume there's a new version. So if I go here, where is it? Yeah, we're a bit newer. This is fine. This is fine. I've got a change log. We can see all
Oh,
the new versions and stuff. So yeah, there's a couple of like text change, that kind of stuff, but it's nothing super important.
right.
But this is how you bring in the AWS controls. Let's say I need it in spec AWS, and that then gives you the ability to go and write AWS controls, and then in our controls, we can split those down into sort of verifying groups, verifying users, those kind of things. Here, file, we're just going to verify some groups. This is not strictly necessary. You don't need to put them in a block of controls. I really like doing that because it then groups them into here's my set of users and all of my user controls. And when it gets printed out to your CLI, it is way more readable and indented really nicely and that kind of stuff. So that's just a personal preference. But I also really like doing things like the impact one. So one or high, if this fails, it fails bad. And again, a bit more metadata here. So a brief description, so verify IAM groups, and then description. This is my most important field out of this entire section, which is verify that the groups contain the correct users. So why does this test exist in the tool? And if you've tuned to the stream before, I'm really keen on this field because the number of tests I've walked into going, oh, why is this test here? I don't really give a crap about this test. I'm just going to go and delete it. And lots of other testing tools don't allow you to describe why the test is there. Because the why the test is there is for me the most important bit, because if I'm then refactoring it later on, I know the intent of the test, which is sometimes, even with a really clearly and easily written test, is really hard to figure out what's going on there. So I'm really keen on a good description. So I used to have a Docker container build that then tested a particular environment variable was there set, and you look at the environment variable and go, yeah. I'll ask that in a second. Why is the test there at all? And I just why is the environment variable there? Well, now I know why it's there, and I know why I'm testing it. And the next person who comes along and it breaks, well, actually, this test is really important to keep, and it should definitely always pass. We can't just delete it or ignore it or use a waiver, which is inspect waiver, to say, hey, we don't really mind that this thing isn't passing right now. We accept it for a month or two. You may say that if you're testing the certificate resource and verifying a certificate is valid, if it's not valid for a couple of days, then maybe that's okay. It probably shouldn't be, but you can say, hey, this is fine for next week, and you can waive that control for a week. Gerald 22, what does inspect base its assertion / data on? The return from Terraform plan, some internal logic inside inspect, or something else? So it's completely separate. So TerraTest does TerraTest at very least when I 2 years ago now, Jesus, when I wrote this, it required outputs from Terraform. Inspect does not do that at all. It goes to AWS and checks the resulting resources. So it knows how to talk to AWS. It goes to AWS and says, what is the actual case here? It doesn't really care if what Terraform has done, what it hasn't done. It doesn't mind, which is very, very handy, because if you're doing a test-driven development cycle, you'll write the tests first and say, right, I want, let's say, the IAM group users to exist. You can write this test first of all, and it will fail, and then write the Terraform for it. And you haven't got to do anything else about outputs. So let me just scroll down to outputs here. The IAM group users and memberships and these kind of things. These are only here for Terra test. But inspect doesn't require these at all. It just goes straight to the resource and checks them, which is really, really nice because then you've got a separation of concerns there. And inspect will go off and check separately. Terraform already needs credentials to go and create it, so usually in your pipeline you'll have the credentials to do that.
Nice.
Oh yeah, so yeah, totally. I'm going to highlight this. So yeah, the output from Terraform itself isn't. It's rarely representative of what actually happened on AWS a lot of the time. Sometimes that's down to. I'm going to have the screen a second. Like sometimes that's down to just how AWS is. Like you'll try and do an IAM resource, that kind of stuff. If you create IAM and Terraform thinks, yeah, it's done, but it's eventually consistent. So like the IAM control panel will say, yeah, I've done it, but it's not actually, it doesn't exist if you query it and then query it. Silly things like that, ventral consistency, that kind of stuff can really get you. But if you've got two separate tools, one actually doing it and then one checking it, it's quite handy. I personally really like that. Does anyone have any other questions about? But so like a whistle stop tool, but it's actually stupidly simple. If you've seen Inspect before, in fact, if you haven't seen Inspect before, let me just bring up. We're going to be lazy and do this. There we go. So yeah, if you haven't seen Inspect, docs.chef.io/inspect will get you there, and then we've got a bunch of. Don't want that. On resources. So OS resources are usually the ones that are baked into core inspect. There may be a couple of resources that are in this list. The OS resources that are not in core inspect, but there's the AWS pack, the Azure pack, and the GCP pack, and the Habitat pack. I think. So let me just bring up AWS, and as you can see, there's probably not everything covered, but I'll give you a lot of the way there. So where did I say? I'll just bring up a DynamoDB table because I can. Things like table name and basically everything you want to query about DynamoDB tables are there, which is really nice. I wonder if I've got. So it's like Terraform creates your Postgres database. So just. I bet you it won't come up underneath here. So it's VPC stuff. Yeah. So here's the RDS instance and all the RDS based stuff. But the other thing Inspect can do is go into the database itself and check that tables are there. So if I go to OS, HIMO, so if you've got a Postgres database that's managed, all of these Postgres resources here, and they can actually you can then test the Postgres database that way instead, which is quite nice. So the session resource is quite interesting in the fact that you can go into the database itself and then check other stuff, which is really nice, and then run queries against databases. This is a scary resource. I probably wouldn't use it, but it's quite interesting.
So this is okay. You can run queries against a database using Inspect. Wow.
I had forgotten this existed, and I was like, oh, I wonder if I could do this actually. And yeah, there's some really, really powerful stuff. So there we go. Actually, just I'll bring it back up again.
That's really interesting.
Describe SQL query. So select star from PG shadow where password is null. So check if there are users with no passwords, should be 0. It's a pretty simple thing to do. But this is really the power of Inspec and people will be rolling their eyes at me at this point. Like, well, yeah, Dan, of course you're going to say that. You work for Chef. Yeah, but long before I worked for Chef, I was using Inspect for like this kind of stuff, really, because
Interesting.
it's really flexible. Um, Sometimes I use Inspect for just checking if DNS is working because I'm weird like that.
Hmm.
But you can check that your DNS resolver is working because it can go and do DNS queries for you. It's a bit of an edge case, but it does work. You can just run Inspect that way. Um, it's really nice. Uh, yeah. So for testing based on what's actually in your environment, what would the testing process look like? Would you write the tests, write Terraform changes, apply it, then run test it, and roll back? No, that's great. That's a really nice set of questions, and I'm going to bring them up real quickly. So
Hmm. Go ahead,
basically,
Rob.
what's our test? What testing strategy would I recommend? Um, Depends. This is what just going to get your cop out. Depends. No. So it's a really nice, really great question actually. There. Um, how I've done it in the past, and Tom might be able to um, correct me on this and see if he's done anything different. I personally like putting things in modules um, if I've got discrete bits of logic, or if you've got like an entire application that doesn't need to be in a module, then test it there. So you've got your Terraform there that you're adding a new feature to. Let's say you're now adding a new RDS database. Simple out. So you're adding a new RDS database. The first thing I would do, if I felt like doing this and I didn't trust myself to write the correct Terraform, is I would write a test first. Write a really simple RDS doesn't exist test, and I would run that locally in what I like to call what I like to use branch-based environments. So I'd have my own development environment, which would be the same as production, but then I bring up the entire environment and it would have no Postgres database, for example.
Mm.
I'd write a test, make sure it failed, and then I would write Terraform to do that. So I'd do a inspect exec and run my tests. They would then fail, and then I would just do a Terraform apply with my new configuration, and then watch them go in there. From a CI/CD perspective, I would let Terraform apply first of all, and then watch for the resulting output there.
Mm.
I wouldn't necessarily do rollbacks with infrastructure, especially you can do rollbacks, but what I would do is probably commit like sort of rollback a commit instead, rather than just going like, oh yeah, like it should be a conscious choice at this point because you could be destroying large bits of infrastructure like your ALBs, databases, which you might want to need.
Yeah,
And so,
I
like
can.
those kinds of questions, those kinds of things, the automatic rollbacks, I wouldn't be doing. I wouldn't be comfortable doing. I would always have a human in there because I always think like, well, if I destroy this S3 bucket, for example, well, a rollback might not work there because you might need to destroy all the objects in the bucket or force delete the bucket. So there's odd things that can get you creepy, like or database won't let you delete it because of deletion protections on, for example. So you need to go and do a bunch of things to make sure you can delete and roll back the database. But in general, I would write a test first, as much as you're doing test-driven development. So heavy use of branch-based environments. I flipping love them. You really isolate your changes. You can see if your change is going to affect a bunch of other things as well at the same time. What happens if you don't have? What happens if you don't have branch-based environments for infra yet? First of all, I'd ask why not, because they're awesome. And two, you would just need like some way of testing your changes before you get anywhere near production. Really, that's the key. There is how do you test your changes before you get anywhere near production. If that's a development environment, if it's a shared development environment, that can work. If you're not doing too many infra changes, I've done that in the past without branch-based changes. We've just applied to a non-production environment, and that can work if you haven't got a high cadence of change. Okay, you're not going to step over each other's feet. So if I'm going to apply something and then Dave comes along and applies something there, then you're not going to like, yeah, blat each
Yeah,
other's changes
override
out,
each
which makes
other's.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, oh my God, I hate when that happens.
Mm.
It's like the worst.
I mean, I guess from a dev perspective, it's a bit like working on a shared database. Hey, I'm just going to add this new table. Yeah, okay, go for it. Actually, that breaks all of my tests. And I've seen developers work on shared SQL servers before, and I'm like,
Yeah, it's a
just
real
get your
pain.
own database. Get your own database. You can
It's a
afford it these days.
especially yeah, like especially for dev. Yeah, like
Yeah.
migrate. You use your own development database and migrate, please, please, for the love of everything good.
Yeah, right. These are
Yeah.
really cool questions. I mean, but if
Thank
does
you.
anyone have any suggestions about other ways of doing it? Because I'm a massive fan of branch based environments. That was a nice thing that
Mm,
got shown to me a few years ago, and I'm like, if I can have that back again, if I ever need that ever again, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And then a shorter path to production as possible um, is always good as well. So you're not like, oh well, if I go and do this, then I've got to do like an environment, like I got to put to 5 more environments and then production. It's just like, well, you get a bit bored after a while. It doesn't feel like you own the change anymore. So small, frequent changes, I'd also
Yeah.
recommend.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's the name of the
but
game. Small frequent changes.
yeah.
I don't know. One day I want to have a chat about agile, and I wonder how like the DevOps community feels about agile versus like the development community because small frequent changes, yes, but there's a lot of ways where I don't know.
Yeah, it depends what I'm doing. So if I've got a green, I'll. My chair seems to be falling apart.
Uh-oh.
It's just
The little
the
picture that goes upside that makes you go up and down.
yeah, it just fell off my
Wow.
leg. That's fine. I got really confused. I thought it was a small child, and then I realized he's at nursery. It's like can't be him. Um, what were we saying before I got distracted by my chair falling to pieces?
Oh, we were just talking about we were talking about agile, and you were saying it depends on what you're doing, whether you like agile or not.
So I really like agile. Although I guess the word agile can mean a million different
Many
things or a
things.
million different kind of things. If you're just talking about small, frequent changes, then that's
Yes.
always my preferred thing.
Yep.
Uh, although small is relative,
Yep.
definitely
Frequent.
relative. Like
Yep.
if the smallest bit of change you can make is an entire table flip, then do the table flip. Like sometimes if you pull on a bit of string, so
Right.
like if I was doing when I was rewriting the Apache cookbook, it's just me doing software development. Um, yeah, um, me doing a bit of software development is just like on Apache 2 is it's I'm basically just being a Ruby developer at that point. So it's not really like there's no difference between being a DevOps person or a developer at that point really. Uh, but I pulled on a piece of string and I was like, if I change this one thing here, I
Mhm.
have to change all of these other things. So to get the test to pass again, when you're like, I guess I'm doing this then, because sometimes changes are just huge, even though they're the smallest change you can make. And
Yeah.
that's what
I mean,
that's what
that's true.
yeah.
That's true. I mean, those are inevitable, and that works. I guess like sometimes the culture around agile is something that like definitely at its core it's great, but it's just implementations at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and
So like I guess there'd be like people who really really like Jira and Confluence and that kind of stuff.
hmm
Um, Surprise, I'm not one of those people because I like responsive UIs, and by responsive I mean like if I click a button, it actually happens in the next half an hour. Um, like, but that's just an implementation of Jira. Like some people really like their implementations of Jira because it gets out of the way and does the stuff for them. But I've never had a Jira implementation that has worked for me personally.
hmm
So kind of like that's kind of like that one of those things, isn't it? And some people love Jenkins because they've had a really really nicely bespoke model of Jenkins. Again, I've not had that. but some people love it, right?
Yes, I love it. That's very true. That is very, very true. Well, good. I think this was
Yeah.
a great stream. Oh, thank you, Top Driver. Top Driver says he loves the new YouTube content and it's a lot of help. That's awesome. Like, we'll definitely pass the word for sure. Because that's
As
probably
I'm
John
guessing that is the Chef Comp stuff. I'm guessing.
could be, or a lot of John Tonello stuff ends up on YouTube. So, like his
Oh yeah,
videos and stuff, they rock. And I would just imagine that that's what you're talking about because they're pretty awesome.
yeah. Oh, it would have been John's.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, John is great with those tutorial vids.
yeah. It's really really cool.
Cool.
Does anyone have any more questions about anything Terraform related or Inspect related? Really, now is the chance to ask. Or just tell me I'm wrong with branch based environments because they're too costly. I'm happy with that. If not, we're going to call it a day.
Then call it. Get on to our next meeting.
Yeah. Right. Thank you very
Right.
much, everybody, for joining, and we will see you next Tuesday,
Yes.
where we will
That's
definitely argue about IDEs.
sweet. And
Yeah.
Tuesday is the debugging day. So who had the debugging problem? Was it Top Driver? Top Driver. I mean, so if you're not on community Slack, or if you're not able to get your questions answered on community Slack, next Tuesday we're doing debugging help. So
Yeah.
tune in, and we can possibly help you. Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your week, and tune in on Tuesday.
Brilliant.
Bye.